Were you surprised that you found yourself in it? Like you think you have like this unique, well, we're going to do this Velvet Underground type of melody, melodic harmony type band. And all of a sudden you find yourself in this Paisley Underground scene. Did
Well,
you, do you like to be called the Paisley
Yeah.
Underground band, or was it just so happened that you found yourself with other bands that played some
And
well,
similar stuff, similar
first
music?
question first. The Velvet
Okay, go
Underground
ahead.
was well, but that was a. I would say that was much more of a subliminal influence. And when you say harmony, I'm going to dispute that because there's virtually zero harmony in the Velvet Underground. And when we were thinking harmony, we were thinking the Byrds and the Beatles.
Yeah.
That's what we were thinking. Not that we
But
didn't.
melody, though, I think.
Yeah, melodic songwriting.
Songwriting, yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Go ahead, Stephen. You take the second half of that.
Well, yeah, I think we were all about reintroducing melodic songwriting, and but we were also very inspired by. We all loved kind of vintage instruments, and Gretches and Rickenbackers and Fender. I had a Fender Jazz, and then I had a Les Paul jazz bass. But we just kind of spontaneously incorporated all these different sounds that we loved into kind of a new formulation. And the term Paisley Underground never bothered me. I always thought it was, that's actually kind of strangely accurate. Although it was also kind of didn't really mean anything specific. It was effective in kind of marking the moment in the musical progression of that time of the evolution of music in the early 80s, where all the influences from the 50s, 60s, and 70s were kind of blending into something that was kind of sounding new in the 80s. So in that way, it's kind of a funny and memorable term. It was I always thought it was kind of accurate in a way, but it wasn't like a real 60s-ish thing. There was definitely those influences. We all loved that music, but what the Paisley Underground really was just a few bands. It was more of a scene at its core. A few bands that kind of all had similar influences, and we all ended up playing in clubs in LA at the same time, so we all became friends. Some of us knew each other before. Like we were good friends with the Hoffs, with Sue Hoffs. We grew up together. So we had connections before that scene happened. But really it was just mainly the Rain Parade and Dream Syndicate, and then the Bangles and Salvation Army, who became the 3 O'Clock. And then Green on Red we were really good friends with them, still are. And there was the Long Rider. So, and then there were some other adjacent bands, but it was really just a small group of bands. And I think the term Paisley Underground has taken on all these other meanings, but that's where it started.
it has just the connotation of the sound, and we know what it means, but we didn't know the origin of it. How.
Yeah.
I think Michael Quercio from Salvation Army, who at Salvation Army was absolutely a garage punk band to begin, and then they got really kind of flowery later. But he loved all that stuff, and I think he just kind of blew that out of us, where. Anyway, and then it stuck. But it really was. We were too young to be punks, and we had older brothers and sisters. Steven has an older sister. I got older brothers, and Vicky and Deb had an older sister, and I think Wynn had an older sister too. But anyway, all these record collections that we grew up on, we were a little too young to be punks, so we had heard all that stuff when we were kids on the radio. And that proximity and our relative age, those are factors. But it really was something happening everywhere. I mean, it wasn't just in Los Angeles, and there were other bands. And LA's big enough to have multiple scenes. There was like heavy metal stuff too, but and sort of roots kind of thing with, like, if you want to go like Rank and File, the Blasters and Los Lobos and all that stuff. But if you go to, say, Athens, then you got Love Tractor and Dump Truck and obviously REM and those guys, and then Winston-Salem, there's the DBs and Mitch Easter. And then you go to New York, and it's Winter Hours and Certain General and the Feelies, or if you go to Jackson, Mississippi, it's the Windbreakers, and I mean, so there's, or if you go to Davis, then there's, Game Theory and Thin White Rope, who I love Thin White Rope. They were fantastic. So it
Yeah, this
wasn't
was like it was a national scene.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a
yeah,
national.
yeah.
It was like
LA.
Yeah.
yeah, it was like a new American music movement
you-
underway.